It's time. We have a quorum. Let's resume. Paul's not here. Paul's not here. Perhaps, Gary, you could start with 2B. Yes, please go ahead. Put your hands up, please. Raymond, Allen. When Paul's back, he will also be given the floor. Now we move on to part 2. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On this part, I'd like to pick up on my question at the last hearing about job creation. In many of the mega events, in the applications, it's stated that jobs will be created, but we found actually many were unable to deliver on the number of jobs they promised to create. Last night, we were given Gen 5, 6, 7 very late, but I went through them. Can I please ask the witnesses to note this? Next, I'm going to talk about page 64 to 66 of Gen 5. Can you do this? I want to read it all out to them so they know which part I'm going to talk about, and then I'll refer to the details later on. Gen 7, pages 69 to 71. So Gen 5 first, right? Well, I'll ask about the two together because I'm on the question of job creation. Paul, let him start first, okay? As you might recall, last time I asked Director Koh and Mr. Chen Kam Lam on their assessment about job creation. At the last meeting, or last hearing, Mr. Chen Kam Lam stated from the outset that as they planned the Dragon and Lion Dance extravaganza, they did not take into account the job creation factor at all. But then the mega events funds were supposed to promote job creation, so that's a different view. And then Gen 5 and Gen 7, Mr. Chan provided the objective of his events, and certainly he did not mention that his events would create jobs. But then, later on, from information he quoted, say in Gen 5, which page please? Page 66, handwritten page number 66. In the 2010 application, it stated here 1,000 short-term jobs will be created. In the 2011 application, he said 2,400 short-term jobs will be created. In the 2011 application, page 71, it's stated here 3,000 short-term jobs will be created. So can I ask the assessment committee, the administration, and Mr. Chen this? The three figures. The first year 1,000, the second year 2,400, the third year 3,000. The same event. How come for the same event every year you would create different number of jobs, and actually there's a substantial increase year by year? In the vetting of the applications, did the assessment committee ever question that, or did you just say, oh, okay, as long as they stated the number of jobs they create, we would endorse it? And Mr. Chen, when you filled in these figures, did you actually consider whether you could meet the target you set out yourself? The Commissioner, Mr. Lam, and then Mr. Chen. Mr. Chairman, event C1, mega event C1, let me make that reference. In the application form, it stated that 1,000 jobs of various types would be created. The MEF Assessment Committee, as I explained at the last hearing, would of course consider job creation as one of the economic benefits. When we saw the figure 1,000, as we vetted the application, we would consider whether for the scale of the events, the estimation was reasonable. But then it was the first time that the event was held in Hong Kong, so we all had to group our way along a bit. Now, so the assessment committee accepted this as one of the objectives of the applicant. After the event organizer submitted a report on the number of jobs created. Actually, there were more jobs created than originally stated, and the increase was actually rather substantial. Actually, our colleagues observed the performance itself. It was a major performance. There were 1,100 lions, and there were many other details involved, so they needed a lot of staff to make the arrangement. And that's why we thought it was a reasonable target. And then for events C2, C3, and C4, the subsequent events. Now, whether it's the lion dance, dragon dance, or unicorn dance, or whether it involves the big head Buddha, yes, there was adjustment to the figures, but it's true the figure was higher than that in the first year. And as we assess these events, now the number of jobs created compared to the first year's experience, it's actually not a huge difference. That's why the assessment committee accepted the figure and included that in the contract as a requirement. Mr. Lam, as the assessment committee assessed all applications, we dealt with them independently. Please go back to events C1, C2, and C3. Well, for events C1, C2, C3, and C4, we looked at each application individually and independently. And as we consider the applications, we would see if they meet the 4 core objectives and the criteria. Now, in the assessment criteria, there's one point. That is whether the mega event would create jobs directly and the nature of such jobs. The nature, by nature, it means whether the job is long-term or short-term. Now, could the mega event create jobs for Hong Kong, and how many local jobs could be created? Now, that is not the primary or decisive factor for the assessment committee to recommend whether to support the application. So event C1, 1,000 jobs, and C2, 2,400 jobs, and that number kept going up in subsequent events. How do you see that? Have you ever considered this point? Maybe, on the substantial increase, what was your view? Can you please respond to that? Mr. Chairman, as I said, for each application, we would handle it independently or individually. That is for events C1, C2, C3, C4. And each event is not identical in terms of nature. Some is just lion dance, some is just dragon dance, and some is just the big head Buddha dance. So that means you find the increase in jobs is acceptable, right? So because the question is whether you accept that the number of jobs created could increase from 1,000 in event C1 to a much higher number in other events. Do you accept that? Let me put the question the other way, Mr. Chairman. When the assessment committee decided to accept these job creation figures, did they consider the report submitted for the events the year before? Because sometimes in the report there might be information to say that the indicator of job creation was not met. So you mean when you considered an application, did you refer to early reports to find out that actually they could not meet their target in early events, and still you approve the application? Is that the case? Well, we base our discussion on information provided by the applicant, and the information, of course, would first be analyzed by the Secretariat. As I mentioned, for each application, here we're talking about events C1, C2, C3, C4. Each event is different in content. So we can't say that the first year there is this number, so the second year there's an increase. Is that increase reasonable or not? No. Rather, we look at each application independently. We look at the content of the application itself and the number of participants and so on. So we can't really consider all 4 events together. The Commissioner or Deputy Commissioner, can you please clarify? As you recommend to the assessment committee to approve the application, did you ever tell the committee that the applicant is the same one for previous events? And then last time, how the events performed, especially in terms of job creation, did you advise the assessment committee of such information? Deputy Commissioner, first of all, we will consider each application, and the assessment committee will decide whether to approve the application. If it's decided funds will be provided, then of course after the event there will be an evaluation report of the event. The assessment committee and the Secretariat will be able to see that whether the targets set for the previous events were met. Now for the event C1, jobs created 1,000 on the application form, but in the report they quoted a higher figure. And then for event C2 in the second year, we wouldn't say that last year their target was so much. We did, as the chairman of the assessment committee mentioned just now, that is, we'll look at this particular event, how much staff they need and whether it's reasonable, and then we'll assess the event accordingly. And when event C2 was completed, of course, we would also read the evaluation report and relevant information. We'll see whether they were able to meet their targets.
Chairman, the organizing of this event, in studying how to host this event, we considered how the mega event could attain our goals. So in the whole organization stage, we did not recruit any staff to promote this work. So in our forecasts, we had indicated approximately how many job opportunities would arise out of the event. Each event has a different scale, and on the first occasion we had just done a rough estimate. We had said there were about 1,000 job opportunities, but in fact, after hosting the event, we had our own assessment. The actual number was much larger than this forecast figure. Internally, we had a figure of more than 2,000. So on the second occasion, we had experience. We had a closer estimate, and the same for the third occasion. But I want to emphasize, when we made an application, it was just a forecast that we filled in the application form. We had to conclude the whole event in order to get the figures, the attendance figures, and through our co-organizers and other organizing units, we could we could calculate how many lions and dragons participated in the event. And that is bona fide. And I want to refer to C4. The Audit Commission colleagues were on the scene monitoring our work. And their conclusion, we had forecast 3,000 job posts, and there was a large shortfall with their assessment. So this indicates that in our application and in the final assessment after the event, there is a shortfall. That's a very natural phenomena. In C1, C2, C3, it was the same. Our forecast was just an estimate. Ultimately, how many people would participate you'd have to count the actual number of attendance figures. The job figures, if it were higher, they would get more points in the assessment process. And if the job figures were larger, the expenditure and funding they would get would be larger. So in this respect, we need to clarify matters. In future auditing of job opportunities, the figures that we are given are very coarse. Please refer to Gen 6, page 251. How do you persuade how many jobs you have is in Appendix 7A, page 251. There's a letter to the convener of the event saying that there are 1,300 people. Let me quote, I submit proof that 1,300 people were recruited for the 2012 1st of January Dragon Lion event, and there is a list of organizations. So the convener is supposed to accept that 1,300 people participated just on this piece of paper. And in the next page, Appendix 7B, it says 1,300 people were recruited for the Dragon Lion dance on 1st of January 2012. So I want to ask Mr. Chan, these two associations letters to you, you will accept it, and what measures did you undertake to confirm that 1,200 and 1,300 people were recruited? And when the Secretariat received this report, did they raise any questions? Chairman, my question doesn't arise in one event. I have read 3 reports, and all 3 reports report in the same manner, saying how many people participated. That's just one example. Mr. Chan, the co-organizers and documents that they submit are made on the basis of Dragon Lion teams that participated. When we applied for funding from the Mega Event Fund, it's not, we don't get more or less funding based on the number of participants we fill in the application form, because we understand that the MEF funding has only 2 uses. They're not related to our salaried posts. The MEF funding has only two purposes: for promotion and embellishing our activity. So, regarding the salary posts, the expenditure on salary posts, they are not related to the MEF funding. So therefore, our organizations have no incentive there is no anticipation for them or expectation for them to exaggerate the numbers. And in fact, after the events, according to the rough calculation of Dragon and Lion participants, that's how we get the salaried post figures. We report in good faith. I wanted Mr. Chan to clarify that he said that this money, you've asked 20 minutes already. Where does he get his transport allowance? Well, I just want him to clarify. You can queue in another round. Thank you, Chairman. All the Dragon Lines performers' expenses are from charitable donations. Assistant Commissioner, in considering funding for the mega events, the AC looks at the scale, attractiveness, whether it can be successfully hosted, job creation, as I said, in one of the consideration is the economic spin-off. It's not the ultimate consideration. When we look at the figures, we consider whether the number is appropriate. We are more concerned about whether the event can be hosted successfully in C1, C2, C3, C4 mega events. In our evaluation report submitted by the organizers, on page 251, we don't take it at face value. In the audit process, we want explanations from the organizers, or we rely on staff observation or news media reports. In events C1, C2, C3, C4, there's a supplementary evidence. Whether it is from the evaluation report or the appendix, we were able to set some Guinness records, and these were objective figures, and we used this information to assess whether the figures were accurate. It should be Wang Yokman's turn, but you stepped out, so Chan Hakan, I think Leung Sing. Let me read the names: Paul Yokman, Alan, Kenneth. Okay? If you need to vote, we can pause. How about Alan Leung ask questions first, and I can return after voting? I'm chairman, I don't need to vote. Okay, then Wang Yokman go first. Paul, you can go and vote. Chairman. I want to look at paragraph 2.8, 2.9, where 69% of events were rejected. Those rejected applications, they couldn't meet the assessment requirements. Some were not very special events. So I want to ask, this assessment committee is only monitored by the Economic and Treasury Bureau, and why can't you tell the applicants why their application was rejected, so they can make improvements, so the public can know that other people can? Well, if you're not transparent enough, there might have been more attractive events than the lion dance, dragon lion dance. So I just have one question: is there any necessity to improve this assessment process? Member is correct. Of course, the unsuccessful applicants, why were their applications rejected? We did not give them a detailed list, a detailed reasoning. We accept the Audit Commission's suggestion. In the future, when their applications fail, we will give them reasons for why they failed, and if they're interested in applying for the MEF, they can make improvements. Regarding the transparency question, the Assistant Commissioner had already responded. The AC had some discussions on this issue. In future applications, if applications were denied, we will tell them where they did not meet requirements. So if in the future, if they want to apply again, they can improve the relevant areas.
Raymond, my second question, Mr. Chairman, is about the financial sanctions 2.10. Now, how did the Tourism Commission find out that those organizations did not comply with the agreement terms? How do you find out? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, there are different scenarios, of course. We have imposed sanctions on 9 events so far. In the information we provided last night, for 5 of these events, we provided a table. The total number of participants, the audience or other participants, the total number of people involved, if that did not meet the target, because this is an event to promote tourism. First is to promote tourism. Second is to allow local residents to take part. So if the participation rate does not meet the target, then that's an obvious case, of course. And you will see that for 5 cases, we've imposed sanctions for that reason. And that's another scenario where we might impose sanction. We want the mega events to give good publicity to Hong Kong, locally and internationally. If there is negative publicity on an event and that might tarnish Hong Kong's image, we would also consider imposing financial sanction, and we've done it in the past. The third possibility is that there is special commitment of the fund of the event. For example, it's going to break a certain record, or there's going to be a major display of something, and if they failed to deliver, then we would also consider imposing sanctions, and we've also done so in the past. Perhaps my question is too straightforward. No, and that's why I should talk about when to impose sanctions. But I'm saying, how did you find out if an organizer has not met the requirement? Because there are media reports, there are also complaints from the public. Usually only then would you find out they have not complied with the agreement terms. So it seems that you're rather passive to wait for the progress report from the organizers. Now, very often, because the funding given is too close to the staging of the event, so very often they don't even submit reports. So before you decide to impose sanctions, how do you find out about the non-compliance? And what is the source of information? And do you just rely on a particular source of information? Are there other sources of information, or do you proactively send out staff to investigate? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, member. Let me be more specific in my reply. Now, for the mega event, when it's staged, we do not just rely on information provided by the organizer. We don't do so also when we do the post-event evaluation. We will make our own observations. We also collect information from other sources. For example, in the annex we provided to members on sanctions. In one case, there was substantial sanction. Which paper is it? Jan 13, Annex C. If you're referring to a document, please. Well, sorry, I only see the documents this morning. I don't see the label. Let me continue. Which case is it? Case 2. 35% deduction of approved funding. That's case 2 on the table. Okay, yes, we've got it. So we deducted 35% of the approved funding. It's because during the course of the event, we found on more than one occasion. Actually, we sent staff on more than one occasion to observe the attendance rate. Even the commissioner went to do the observation from our own observation, and we also checked with the management company of the building on their assessment of the attendance figures. And so from our observation and from other evidence, we could see that the reported attendance figures are highly questionable. So at the end, we decided to impose a sanction. There are other scenarios. For instance, when a mega event is staged, maybe they try to draw publicity with a large windmill, and that's a new event. But then eventually we found that they were unable to install the big windmill because they didn't get approval or something. So without the windmill, we knew objectively that they wouldn't be able to meet their target. And of course, there are other scenarios as well. And mega event is to be held, or just before it's held, we find that the management is chaotic. Maybe we keep sending staff to their meetings, and our staff also offered a lot of advice, but still the management was chaotic, and at the end there was negative publicity on the event. So this is information we gathered on our own, and then on such objective information we decided to impose sanctions. So the Secretariat also does our own work. We don't just rely on the information provided by the event organizers. Raymond? The sanction imposed varies between 5% to 40% of the approved funding. But how do you decide on the scale of the sanction? If there's negative publicity in the media, or they don't deliver on what they promised, that may be a reason for imposing sanction, or the criteria. But how do you set your criteria? How much fine to impose, so to speak? Let me find a document, Mr. Chairman. Example 6 in the audit report, paragraph 3.6, the 40% sanction. Use that as an example, and then you could explain your criteria, okay? Yes, I'll do that, Mr. Chairman. Paragraph 3.6, page 33 of the audit report, example 6, that the organizers failed to perform and deliver the event, or there are some basic principles in imposing sanction. For instance, the degree of non-compliance. We have to consider the nature of the inadequacy, the gravity of the inadequacy, if there are any external factors that might lead to non-compliance, so we'll consider all these factors. There are several ways to impose sanction. Let's not talk about the ways. I'm just talking about the level of sanction. You say there are criteria. Are they in black and white? And does the assessment committee have the criteria in black and white? Can you provide it? That's the most important, because otherwise, what you're saying is just that you do your own judgment, make your own judgment. Well, we have criteria. The committee has also got that. In that case, can you produce that document? Yes, we could do that. Now, this so-called sanction, the funding from the MEF accounts for part of the expenses of the event, and the sanction is within part of the approved funding, right? So how can you ensure that the sanction is deterrent enough? Because they still have money. Maybe they just have to scale down the event, or if they don't have the windmill, still you end up paying them. That's why there's a problem with the system. Commissioner? The general practice of the fund is that before a mega event is staged, after we've signed the agreement, we will give them 50% of the approved funding, so the organizer could proceed with the event. 50%? Not more than 50%? Oh, no, just 50%. Let me put it this way. The mega event fund would not sponsor a mega event by more than 50% of its its project estimate. Now, after the MEF has decided on the maximum amount of sponsorship, we would give 50% of the granted approved funding to the organizer, so he could proceed with organizing the event. And we will withhold 50% of the approved funding. We'll wait till the evaluation report and the audit report have been completed, and also our secretary has completed his own evaluation, and then we'll report to the assessment committee, and the assessment committee may make a recommendation to the controlling officer of the MEF. It's only then the MEF controlling officer may make a decision to either pay the full 50% of the remaining funding to the organizer, or less than the 50% to the organizer. In some circumstances, the first thing we could do is that we would not disperse the 50% of the approved fund to the grantee. But in the course of the mega event, we find that the event is poorly held, but we have not similar cases. We've never had such cases, actually. But if we find that the event is totally unsatisfactory, we could terminate the agreement at once. 2.1. Per 2.1. There are 2.1. There are few events with appeal. It's true, and in fact, you can tell from Annex A most of the events are repeat events. Now, it said that you want to bring in large-scale events. Secretariat of the fund, have you done any studies? Or have you approached events that you think could promote tourism? Have you taken any initiative to approach organizations that may have the potential to stage mega events, or are you being passive? You just wait for applications to come your way? Mr. Yong, if I could report 3 points here to members. First of all, the current MEF mechanism is that we have Tier 1 and Tier 2. Tier 1 is events co-hosted by international organizations. Tier 2, that's something we've been doing since 2009. That is for local non-profit making organizations. They may also stage mega events. Every time when we look for applications or invite applications for Tier 2, we try to do more publicity, so more organizations would learn of the MEF and they could send in their applications. And of course, we also have briefings to let people know more about the MEF. That's the first point. Second point, so some mega events, if it's staged only for 1 year, or we only give them support for 1 year, it may not be possible for them to become established as popular event. So it takes time sometimes for them, we may have to give them sponsorship for another year so that the event could grow and become established. And third point, as the member pointed out, you're right, we don't just wait for applications. Now, especially in 2012, we received a Finance Committee's approval to introduce a second tier. That is, we have Tier 1 and Tier 2 now for the fund. So for Tier 1 events, the established international events, we have commissioned a consultant to do a study, and we have managed to identify some events with potential. So we did approach some of the events organizers. And we're still in discussion with some event organizers bringing some international events to Hong Kong. We will speed up our discussion. Hopefully then some of these events will be staged in Hong Kong. Raymond. Next, paragraphs 2.13 and 14, the deliverables and targets of MEF events. Paragraph 2.13 in the audit report, there are 6 points here on deliverables and targets. A, event deliverables. B, number of paid jobs created for local people. C, number of participants. D, media coverage of the event both locally and outside Hong Kong. E, special tourist packages developed. And F, feedback obtained from participants and spectators, as well as from key stakeholders. Now, the audit report said there is free flow of pedestrians for some events. So there is no accurate head count of the number of spectators or participants. Now, if a mega event is staged in an open venue, there must be media coverage. So then it has to do with D, media coverage of the event, both local and outside Hong Kong, and F, feedback obtained from participants and spectators. D and B, F could take the place of B, number of paid jobs created, and C, the number of participants in the event, in measuring the event, right? So the organizers provide similar information to the secretariat, or would the secretariat collect its own information and say get feedback from the participants? So what's the practice?
The member is correct. Activities in open venues, the Audit Commission has indicated there are difficulties in calculating participants. But as Mr. Wong said, we rely on a lot of other evidence. For example, in event C1, in its first version, when we look at the media coverage, there were pictures and text. We also had staff participating. I was present also as well, and we could estimate how large the event was. We were stationed along Canton Road, and we participated in the parade. The police were also concerned about traffic flow, and the police had said that that event had 60,000 participants. So from our fund, the secretariat, and staff observations, media reports, police statistics, and event scale, it was a world record. We had 1,000+ lines, so we had objective proof of how many participants there were. Let me ask, we asked a question in Gen 8, Gen 4, paragraph 13. Just now, Chen Hakan had asked a job creation question. I have some follow-up. And Mr. Chen Gamlam said their salaries weren't paid through the MEF, it was from charitable donations. Well, if the Audit Commission has questions about the salary post. It's not is it not applicable in your case, Mr. Chen Gamlam? I just stated a matter of fact. I do not want to comment on the audit procedure, whether their comments were reasonable or not. The reason I ask this question is because in paragraph 2.16, that 10,000 jobs were created during the events, and most of the jobs were extremely short-term, lasting 1 to a few days. And the creation of short-term jobs would have little or no impact on the labor market, as pointed out by the Bureau departments when they were consulted by the MEF Secretariat. And paragraph 2.17 says, as mentioned in paragraph 2.14a, although the Secretariat staff conducted headcounts on the number of organizers staff present, they did not randomly verify the number of paid staff employed for the events, nor did they carry out subsequent checks of the organizers' recruitment and payroll records. As a result, there could be a risk of over-reporting in the number of paid jobs created. And so the event C4, the one related to Mr. Chen Gamlam, was used as an example. I'd like to hear the Secretariat's response and then Mr. Chen Gamlam's response. In example 1, it's very clear. I don't want to repeat that. This was reported in media, in newspapers. Assistant Commissioner. If the event subsidized by MEF, the majority of them are held over a short period. For example, C1, C2, C3, C4, they were half-day events. So we understand that it's very hard to request the organizer recruit a long-term post for a half-day event. If they say they could recruit a large number of permanent jobs, we would be suspicious. In general, the events are just between 1 or a few days, so we are aware that the jobs created would be short-term or temporary jobs, and these are local NGOs, so it's very hard for them to deploy a lot of staff on one project. Looking at event C4, the Audit Commission report says there were a large number of short-term jobs. We agree. That's the nature of the event. Regarding number of jobs, whether we had audited that, well, in the ICAC guidelines provided, we needed to conduct on-site inspection and request the MEF organizers to deploy staff with the Secretariat to look at which people were their paid employees. In a lot of events that ran for more than 1 day, we had organizer staff conduct inspections with us, and a lot of times they weren't able to deploy their staff because they were busy. I think the Audit Commission opinion is that aside from sending staff to inspect, we need to ask whether they were paid, do they have payroll records. We accept that in principle, but how can we do it at the front line? This event is not a concert or a movie where you can control the number of participants or number of people on the payroll. So on the event day, I can calculate the number of participants on the event day. So before the event day, we need a lot of staff. We need a lot of staff to handle the preparation. All I can say is that the audit commission, in the audit process, they only saw the people attending on Canton Road on the event day. They do not understand the nature of our event, our operations. So all I can say is what we've declared is bona fide. Well, then there's a problem. Why can't the Audit Commission get this information? Is it not necessary to disclose? That's an issue. So what is the Secretariat doing? The Secretariat, of course, as you pointed out, the relevant documents, a body needs to prove how many people they have on the payroll for this event. That's an MEF applicant document they need to submit. In the audit report regarding events C1, C2, C3, C4, there is a breakdown. How many lions were involved and how many people are involved. This event there were records of lions, dances, unicorns, and so on. There are records. I mentioned just now, these performers or paid staff, their salaries or transport allowances are not covered by the MEF, so we did not ask for receipts and payroll information. Well, don't you think that's a loophole, even though it's not covered by the MEF? But that's a loophole. There are no invoices, no receipts. So, of course, they need to bear responsibility. They need to answer to the public. They don't answer to you. But it's still a loophole. Well, we don't want a mega event to become a debacle. Let's pause first. Could we extend till 1:30? Because Paul and Al, otherwise we stop at 1 and continue on the next session. Let's finish with Paul. As a matter of fact, the organizing committee exercised tight control on expenditure. The money is a reflection of the public's trust in us. Our staff expenditure are calculated according to the attendance figures of the lion, dances, and unicorns. There's no need for us to breach the law. We examine the expenditure very carefully. Even the organizing committee have very strict procedures. So, aside from standard costs, they are also sponsors. They do not charge for the lions they have deployed. So all the sponsorship money is spent very carefully. Well, thank you. I mentioned the secretariat work. I want to state that we have asked the organizers to submit an independent audited report, and the accountancy to provide an opinion whether they have complied with the contractual performance. So this is an important. So even if even if it's not included in the event, they still have to comply with our contractual requirements. Well, Yokman had raised a very important loophole. The MEF, the budget approved, is allowed for special items, and those figures need to be presented. The second point on whether you approve their expenses should be included in the fund, you require proof. So you need them to provide documentary proof, and the Audit Commission has raised this point. And that's why you require an audited account. Is that the case? The event organizer, aside from submitting an audited report, they also need a registered accountant, audited account. That is the accounting for the whole event. It's the accounts for the whole event. The audited account also needs to confirm that the financial reports reflect that the event has complied with our contractual requirements. I think Kenneth will follow up on the audited accounts. Won't follow up here. Kenneth can handle that. Paul, you can. A lot of people have appointments. I'll handle it as soon as possible. Chairman, I'd like to understand that, first of all, we have 3 economic services panel meetings to deal with mega events, 2 FC meetings. So is it fair to say that in these meetings, the administration had used job creation as an important element of economic activity criteria? It's one element, because in our 5 criteria regarding economic stimulus, job creation is one element, and it's also one an easily described criteria. And in each meeting, more or less, there are LegCo members asking about employment figures, loopholes, and so on. They are concerned about this. Is that fair? Assistant Commissioner. Well, if you disagree, if you trust that I went through all the documents, there are such records. I can lead you through them one by one. I dare not say I don't trust Mr. Chair. So is that fair? Let me add that in these meetings, we emphasize the publicity effect of the mega event and Hong Kong being an ideal host and a brand name creation. So in the meetings, these are the important discussions. We're always talking about job creation. If you agree, then I don't need to lead you through the discussions. You agree? Yes. So I want to understand that looking at C1 to C in the 7, 8, 11, CB bracket 1s 450 stroke 10, 11, info 8, A, Finance Committee. Thank you, Chairman. The first Economic Services Panel and 30th of March 09, info 7. The second one was 2010, 22nd of November, info 8. The third one, Economic Services Panel, 20th of March 2011. These were our Economic Services Panels, and 2 FCs on 09, 8th of May, and 27th of April 2011, info 3. I need to check. That's info. Info 1. So we have the 5 sets of documents. So more or less, they each talk about job creation, including the document.
Or when members ask questions, this point was also touched upon. Is that a fair and accurate description? Commissioner, I think we have to state one point first. Every time when we prepared these documents for the electrical, we always first of all set out the benefits of mega events to the tourism sector, the number of participants and the benefits. And then of course, then we would go on to say the number of jobs that could be created by the mega events. Now, in the documents prepared by the PAC Secretariat, you can see that in those documents we may not put the emphasis on job creation, but very often we would talk about the overall benefit. Well, Paul asked you a question. Just say yes or no, because it's a fact. It's in the document, so you just say yes. And then on Gen 1 Annex B4, that's the scoring. So that's how you should answer his question. Well, I'm not saying that there are no other economic benefits. I'm just saying every time one of the benefits mentioned is job creation, every time it was asked and questioned. Now, I'm not trying to frame you. I'm just trying to help you to get the facts right. Yes, in the referendum meetings, this issue was raised. Paul? Another short question, Mr. Chairman. Events C1 to C4, every time there's an agreement between the government and the organizer. Is that correct, Commissioner? If you want, I'll give you the paper reference. The Gen 5, Gen 6, Gen 7, Gen 8 for the 4 years, 2010, 2011, 2012, and 2013. Just say yes. Just answer yes. Okay. And in each contract or agreement, there's an important element, Schedule 2. This is the schedule about the specific agreement terms for each event. Is that correct? Yes. Mr. Commissioner, can you put the microphone closer to you? Somehow you sound really soft. And each of the Annex 2 or Schedule 2, there's an item, deliverables and targets of the projects. In other words, the deliverables and targets of the event, correct? Commissioner? Yes, correct. And in Gen 5, for example, C1, event C1, the agreement signed on the 20th of October 2010, handwritten page number 5. you'll see Schedule 2 deliverables and targets. Commissioner? Yes, I see that. Please go to Para 10E. A minimum of 8,000 non-local visitors. This is one of the important targets, right? Yes. And then page 52. G.
Minimum of 1,000 paid jobs for the local people of Hong Kong. 你見到呢個條款嚇？專員係。我哋應該點樣理解呢啲條？
Yes, I read that. So how are we to interpret these terms? Commissioner? Now these terms are in the application forms submitted by the organizer. These are the targets they set for measuring the impact of the event. Now, of course, the assessment committee will consider these applications. If in the course of evaluating the application, they decided these targets should be set to measure the effect of the event, then this terms will be included in the agreement. And once the agreement is signed, then in future, when the organizer submits the evaluation report, then he must explain whether these targets could be met. And as I explained earlier, and when we considered these targets during the assessment process, there are ways for us to assess that. Next subparagraph, key performance indicators of the project, KPI in other words. Paragraph D.
Jobs created by the project. Record, it is agreed, undertaken and warranted by the grantee that the project shall create a minimum of 1,000 paid jobs for the local people of Hong Kong. 呢個係咪一個其中你哋有 KPI？ 專員。冇錯。
Is that one of your KPI? Yes. And then you use the term agreed, undertaken, and warranted. So that means it's an important undertaking. I'm sure Mr. Alan Leung and Mr. Kenneth Leung would agree with me. Yes, that's the model. That's the text in the agreement. And for the two paragraphs I read out, there's also mention of the number of non-local visitors. Correct. That means for overseas visitors and the number of local jobs, they appear in the same paragraph. That means they're equally important. Is that right to put it that way? Commissioner, well, I think we have to look at it as two separate issues. Yes, of course, the agreement terms must be complied with, but then before the assessment committee approved the application, the score weighting given to, say, the number of overseas visitors and the number of local jobs created, I think the assessment committee will look at each event and forms its views. I hope the witness will answer my question. I'm not asking about the assessment stage. I'm talking about the agreement, the targets, important key performance indicators in the contract, because there's mention of attracting overseas visitors and creating local jobs. And then Schedule 3, payment schedule, is stated clearly that the government will only release the remaining funds after all the terms have been satisfactorily completed. So you just give out 50%. For the remaining 50%, it would depend on the evaluation report. Yes, correct. And last time, Mr. Ko Chi-cham gave an explanation on another event. He said that the number of overseas visitors did not meet the target, so he was deducted some money. He complained quite a bit about it. True. So it means if there is not enough local jobs created, you should also consider deducting the approved funding, right? Commissioner. On how we do with the indicators in the evaluation report, can I defer to Ms. Law to give an explanation? Yes, Ms. Law? I think we have to repeat this. The establishment of the Mega Events Fund. Now, in 2011, we decided to continue the fund, and in 2012, and then we really did want to bring major events to Hong Kong. And then we want new events too. Please just answer his question. It's straightforward. If the event does not create enough jobs, then in accordance with the contract or the agreement, you should deduct the funding, right? Answer yes or no first before you explain it. If it's no, then you can explain why it is no. Because you have gone wrong the tour, but you still haven't answered the question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Every case varies. We have to look at the actual circumstances surrounding each case. Now, for events C1, C2, C3, C4, there is not such a case. That is the reported jobs created and the actual jobs created. These actual jobs created did not meet the target. No, in the application it says 1,000, 2,400, etc. And then in Annex B4, among the criteria, you will evaluate before you sign the agreement schedule 1, 2, 3, KPI, etc. That's why Paul has led you through the process again before he asked you questions. So, Prime Secretary, Mr. Chairman, I understand. If you don't, now of course these are the indicators for us to evaluate whether the targets have been met. But let's say if you're short 1 or 2, would you then make a deduction? So the assessment committee, secretariat, and I, as the controlling officer, will have to look at the overall impact, whether the event was staged most brilliantly. Perhaps they achieved most of the targets, but they fell short just by a narrow margin on another target. Then we'll have to consider it. So in answer to the question, you're saying that the targets may not be met, but you will do the measurement. Yes. Yeah, please give short answers to short questions. If you believe in me, we will come to that. I'll have to give you a chance to answer, to explain it, but people must know what we're talking about. So now we could confirm, at least I hope there's no more objection, that the local jobs created would be one of the KPIs and would be one of the factors for you to consider whether to give the full funding, right? So that will be one of the bases. No objection to that? Okay, fine. Now, when Mr. Raymond Wong asked you questions, you explained how you assess the figures. Mr. Chairman, Paul, sorry, I said I would extend the meeting by 15 minutes. We have to stop here. So it will be like the Korean TV drama. Then we have to wait for the next episode. Yes, there will be plenty more episodes. Because I said we would extend the meeting by 15 minutes, so we must stop here. 2014, the event C4, the audit report is not even ready. If you look at the previous events, usually latest by end of March, the audit reports would have been submitted. For the 2010, 2011, 2012 events, all the reports were submitted latest by end of March. And we read from media report they asked for an extension from the 7th of May to the 8th of May. So where's the report now? Now, in our letter to the Secretariat, we have explained we've only just received the report and the audit report. The Secretariat, actually, for the most part of this week, we had to prepare and provide documents that you requested. Well, our members read the documents till 3 a.m. last night. Yes, I understand that, but every time we receive a report or an audit report, the Secretariat must do the relevant evaluation. And we have to submit the reports to the assessment committee before we could decide whether there are any problems with the report. So we've only just started vetting the reports ourselves. So there may be no point in submitting the reports now because we haven't vetted them yet. But in this report, audit report, there's mention of C4, so we can't leave it out. Mr. Chairman, what I don't get is for C1, C2, C3, these are events held on the New Year. So there's no difference. But now there's a delay of exactly 2 months. Why? Why is that the case? Are you trying to cook up the books? So I have to make my own deduction. Mr. Chen Kamlam? Mr. Chairman, the preparatory committee went by the requirements of the Mega Events Fund in submitting our report within the time frame. When's that? The 1st of May is the deadline. Every year is the 1st of May, the deadline. And before we were able to submit the report early, it doesn't mean that this time around we're still able to submit the report early. And this time around, we also asked for an extension from the MEF. As you know, 1st of May it was a holiday, 6th of May was also a holiday, and 3rd and 4th of May were also weekends, so we didn't have much time to work with. And so we managed to submit the report on the 7th of May. No, this is not about you. No, I have to make this clear because Mr. Alan Leung said asked whether we're cooking up the books, and I can tell you we're not cooking up the books. We have made honest report. I think this, you have to be fair to us.
If you are later than the previous 3 occasions, is it because of the audit commission disclosure? And previously there was no audit commission. I'm just telling you, you should submit it as soon as possible. Otherwise, my deduction can be confirmed. Your problem should not affect our report. We will start with report number 62. We have C1, C2, C3, C4. If we don't have your documents, we cannot draft the report, and we will have to draw our own conclusions. And it's not good for everybody. We want to discover the facts. So we're giving you next week, before we convene a meeting, you should submit the report. And Kenneth, I just want to clarify. C1, C2, C3, the audited reports, one at the end of March, one in February. I don't think that is the truth, because if you look at Gen 8, the C4 Mega Event Agreement, page 27, and paragraph 12A, if the audited report, the audit, it has to be submitted within 3 months. If it is on 1st of January, they have to submit the report by 31st of March. C1, C2, C3, the agreements are the same. And I want to ask, why do you have a discretion to allow a late report? Where does your authority rest? You have to refer to the agreement. Could you explain? The assessment report and audited report in the past, they weren't able to submit it on time, and we were allowed postponed a delay. We allowed them to submit it later than the deadline. Well, you didn't conduct your investigation in May. You had reviewed the report. You didn't see the version 1.11 of the Audit Commission report, but you've seen other versions, and you are aware of the C4 problem. So it's unreasonable for you to not understand the terms of the contract and submission of documents. As a matter of, could you also respond to Mr. Kenneth Leung? Where does your authority to exercise discretion rest? The relevant reports were only received in the beginning of May, and the Secretariat didn't have time to do the review audit work and could not arrange this assessment committee time to scrutinize it. We need to handle it before forwarding it to the AC. So the Secretariat has not had an opportunity, but that's not our problem, Permanent Secretary. We have a time deadline to draft our report, and when we receive this report, we need to review these documents. We sympathize with your problem, but we cannot accept that. We want the documents provided as soon as possible. How you convene your meetings, that's your it's up to your own arrangement. We have to have the document. We have to read the document. Okay? Okay? So, no, we've concluded the meeting at 15 after 1. We've adjourned at 15 minutes after 1 o'clock. Could we have Mr. Nelson Chan, the recipient of Gen 14, why did he add comments about members? Were there other reasons aside from anti-graph? We don't have any differing views. I just want to clarify the letter from why was there a difference between this letter and what happened with the Audit Commission. We can ask another issue. Some people ask whether we could. We have people from the accounting industry ask for a copy of Gen 14. We can disclose it because Gen 14, all our documents are open because we have a third party. We don't know whether they agree, whether they are willing to disclose it. Today is Saturday. We asked them. They haven't replied. So we'll have to wait till next week. Once we get the permission, if I get the permission, we can disclose the document. The recipient, or should it be the person who wrote the letter? Should we get permission? Well, the recipient had raised this issue, and you're referring to who sent the letter? We sent the letter. CPAC, we need CPAC's approval. Even though the meeting has adjourned, you've already... Chairman, let's not argue. The crucial element is that it has been read out in a public inquiry. The Secretariat can provide the parts that have been read out. We're referring to Gen 14. Let's agree. We've read it out on many occasions. We'll just use second paragraph, second sentence rather than the letterhead. We can just read it out. Everybody has read it. That's no problem. We can extract that paragraph. That's in the public domain. Okay? That's the Secretary can set the next meeting date. Thank you.